Hi, my name is John from Japanese Knife Imports, and today we're going to go over stropping and deburring methods for when you finish your sharpening. We've gone over a number of other steps in the sharpening process, including all of the sharpening basics that you'll need to know for your coarse and medium and fine grit stones, how to maintain the stone, flattening it, which kinds of stones need to be soaked, and so on and so forth. But one area that we haven't yet touched on is deburring. So what do you do once you've sharpened one side of the knife and formed a burr and made sure that it's even and consistent, and then sharpen the other side of the knife and made sure that the burr is even and consistent, and gone through this progression on your coarse, medium, and fine grit stones? And the process that we need to go through is called deburring. And what we're looking to do is we sharpen on one side, form a burr, sharpen on another side, form a burr, and we want to get rid of this floppy piece of metal here that sometimes people refer to as the burr or wire edge, so that we have a nice, clean, sharp edge that will hold up over time. And there are a number of ways to do this, and some people, for example, use cork, some people use felt. I sometimes even use the back of my sponges over here, and I'll explain a little bit about those processes as well. But what I'm going to show you is one way to do stuff by using entirely the stone that is in front of you as part of your normal sharpening process. And so the way that we'll go about that is through a series of stropping motions and then a lateral stroke. And I'll show you exactly what all that means and how to go about that. So first, let me start on stropping. What is stropping? Stropping is an edge trailing motion. So whatever direction I'm moving in, my edge is at the back of that motion. So for example, edge trailing, edge leading, edge trailing, edge leading, edge leading, edge trailing, right? So we're going to be doing edge trailing motions, and we're going to be doing these edge trailing motions from the tip to the heel or the heel to the tip, depending on how we want to go about it. Covering the entire length of the blade. And we're going to do this in a series of steps. And so this is where I like to get started. I start generally on the right side of the knife, as that's the side that I normally sharpen first. And what I like to do is this, and I call this the J stroke, as it's kind of shaped like a J. And the reason that I do this, and it looks kind of like this, is that it allows me to avoid this stroke here, which leads to a lot of people gouging into the stone as they go through it. So this kind of stroke allows you a little bit greater room for adjustment, so you're not poking the tip of your knife into the stone. And so the stroke is something like this. We start at the very tip of our knife, so we've lifted up and rotated back towards the spine like we do in our normal tip adjustment. And as we come around this J-shaped curve, we're lowering the knife and also rotating back into our normal sharpening angle. So coming from the top all the way back down and all the way across the stone until we get to the end and we're stopping. We're not lifting up when we get to the end. We're not going off the stone. It's a very precise, controlled motion. So what we're doing is one stroke here. On our back stroke, we can come back this way and do exactly the same thing, from the heel to the tip, from the tip to the heel. You can conversely do a back stroke like this, or the exact opposite of the J stroke if you like. It's entirely up to you of what works best. Let me explain to you what's going on in the stropping motion that we're doing. What we're going to do is strop one time on this side and one time on this side. And what occurs through the process of doing this is that burr gets bent back and forth and back and forth. And in the process of getting bent back and forth, it actually becomes smaller and smaller and smaller as we grind away on the stone. So not only is the burr becoming smaller, but the back and forth motion helps weaken its connection to the edge. Not too dissimilar actually from bending a paperclip back and forth when eventually the paperclip breaks. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to do one time on one side, one time on the other side. It's very important that the angle that you do this stropping motion at is exactly the same angle that you've been doing your sharpening at. So if you need to, use the magic marker trick that we showed earlier, color in the blade, and make sure that you're hitting exactly the same areas. I've noticed in teaching a lot of these classes that I do for sharpening that a lot of people have great difficulty maintaining the same angle in stropping as they do for their normal sharpening. So let me go over this again. Starting here and coming back this way. As we do these motions, we're trying to adjust for the curve of our blade, make sure that we get all the way through from heel to tip. So again, starting here, I'm already starting with my knife lifted up and rotated back towards the spine like we discussed in our sharpening of the tip videos. And I rotate around and come back into the rest of my blade, and I stop. And on my back stroke, as I come towards the tip, I'm lifting up and rotating back to allow myself to follow the curve of the blade and make sure that I'm being consistent as I cover the knife from heel to tip. I'm going to do this for a number of times, and it's very difficult to give a concrete number of how many times it should be exactly. and it's going to vary based on the kind of steel of the knife and the stone that you're using and the way the knife has been heat treated, how big the burr was when you got started, and all kinds of other variables. And so what I tell people is, pick something, anything, and do that, and then we're going to try and remove the burr and see what happens. One common way that I teach this in my sharpening class is I say, do 10 sets and see how things go. And what I mean by 10 sets is this. We'll do one time here, and one time here, and that's 1. And we'll do this 10 times. And it's not that the 10 has any significance, it's that it gives you something to start with. So that once you've done all of this, you can then come back and see if the burr actually comes off, which brings us to our second part of the burr removal process. So this first part, this stropping motion, I would use even before I used felt or cork or the back of my sponge or whatever it is that I want to do. It's even possible to use a towel, like a kitchen towel that you can step on with your foot and pull tight and strop against that once you've done this motion. So we're trying to reduce and weaken the burr first, and then we're going to remove it. When we're ready to remove the burr, the way that I like to do stuff on the stones, and again, this is not the only way, this is just one particular way that I've found to be effective, and it's this. First, I set myself up with one of these J strokes. And the reason that I do that is now I know where my burr is. I know that it's facing up this way, on the opposite side of where I just did my stropping motion. Then I put my knife laterally across the stone and I pull, adjusting for the tip, lifting up and rotating back towards the spine. Again, to show you one more time, essentially I'm just drawing a straight line across my stone as I pull across. And what's happening is this. If I've done a good enough job through my stropping and through my consistency of sharpening to make a small burr and make it weak, when I set myself up with this J stroke and have the burr on one side, as I flip it over and grind laterally across the stone, this burr no longer has anywhere to go, and so it comes off. And so this is just one way that you can do things. So one more time just to show you here. This is our stropping motion. Once we've done our stropping, we can do this lateral stroke. If you notice that through the course of doing this lateral stroke, the burr is not yet removed, you can go back to stropping and try that. You're also more than welcome to try some other means. For example, cork is one way you can deal with things. And what people tend to do with cork is they slice gently through the cork, hoping that because it's kind of fibrous and flexible, it will grab onto the burr and help remove it. People can also use soft woods like balsa or the edge of your cutting board and hard felt. I know that other people also like to strop on hard felt, and that's a totally effective means for removing the burr. And lastly, this is my little cheating method that I have. I always have these sponges here in my sharpening setup. They're very convenient for me to clean things off. And it turns out that this blue part over here, this scrubby blue part, is really effective at removing little bits of burr. And so what I'm doing is gently coming across it this way. And the important thing is that this isn't horribly abrasive, so I'm not really causing so much damage to my edge if I do this lightly. But it does allow me to clean up my edge. I still tend to finish by doing this kind of lateral stroke. But it's very important that, 1, you maintain the same angle. 2, that this is a very precise, controlled movement. You're not lifting up as you move in one direction or another. You're not going off the edge of the stone. 3, that you follow the entire length of the blade, adjusting for the curve, so lifting up and rotating back towards the spine. And 4, pay attention to the burr. Feel on both sides of your knife. See, is there still a burr there? Can I feel it? What's going on? Is it straightened out? There are some tests that you can do, and we show this in one of our other videos. We talk about the thumb test of making sure your knife is sharp by putting it gently against your thumbnail and pulling ever so lightly. We're not trying to cut through our nail. We just want to see that the knife digs in and has some bite. And another test that you can do is take the blade and flex it against your thumbnail and see what happens. Is my edge ground so thin that it flexes? That could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on what you're looking for. But when it comes to the burr, what I'm looking for is to make sure that as I do this kind of motion, something doesn't bend up and stay. That would be a burr that I didn't get rid of. It may have been straightened out through the process of what I've been doing or something else. So then I'd go back to work and continue to clean up my edge until I have a nice, clean, sharp edge. So I hope that this helps you guys out with regard to burr removal and stropping. If you have any questions, you can always find us at www.japaneseknifeimports.com or shoot me an email at john@japaneseknifeimports.com. Again, that's JON@japaneseknifeimports.com. Thank you guys so much for watching.